The clock in Detective James's office chimed midnight, echoing through the silence. The hands of time were not in his favor, but James was no stranger to late nights. His office, shrouded in a cloak of dim light, was filled with the weighty scent of old case files and stale coffee. Just as he was about to surrender to the lure of his bed, the shrill ring of the phone sliced through the quiet. His weary hand reached for the receiver, his voice, laced with fatigue but ever ready, answered, "Detective James?" A sense of urgency crackled through the line. "Detective, we need you at the Johnson estate. There's been a murder." The words hung heavy in the air, the magnitude of the situation sinking in. James's heart pounded in his chest, the rhythm matching the ticking of the wall clock. In a flurry of motion, he was on his feet, shrugging into his worn-out coat and hat. The prospect of a warm bed was replaced by the chilling reality of a fresh murder. His car keys jangled in his hand as he dashed out, the door slamming shut behind him with an ominous echo. The night was as cold as the case that lay ahead. The Johnson estate, a grand spectacle during the day, was now a beacon of gloom on the town's outskirts. The mansion was shrouded in shadows, its grandeur marred by the unfolding tragedy. As James's car ate up the distance, the only company he had was his thoughts, racing to piece together a puzzle that was yet to be revealed. The estate's tall iron gates loomed ahead, their imposing presence dwarfed by the sight of flashing lights and police cars scattered across the driveway. The chaotic scene was a stark contrast to the usually serene mansion, its lush gardens now a canvas for a grim masterpiece. The Johnson estate loomed ominously in the distance as James pulled into the driveway, the flashing lights painting a vivid picture of the chaos inside. Another late-night call, another story to unfold, another mystery to solve. Detective James was once again at the heart of it all. The scene inside the Johnson mansion was one of disorder and shock. Once the grandeur of this sprawling estate, now the mansion was an epicenter of chaos. Blue and red lights flickered outside, casting an eerie glow on the antique furnishings and priceless artworks. Officers scurried around, their footfalls echoing in the halls as they searched for any shred of evidence. In the center of this whirlpool of activity was Detective James, a steady rock amidst the turbulent sea. His eyes, sharp and analytical, scanned the room where Mr. Johnson's body lay, a pool of crimson staining the polished floorboards. He noted the stab wounds, the signs of struggle, and the absence of any signs of forced entry. It was a chilling thought. The killer had not broken in. The killer had been invited, had walked through these ornate doors as a guest, maybe even as a friend. James started his interviews, his questions slicing through the thick air of uncertainty. He spoke to the Johnson family first, their faces a mask of grief and shock, their alibis airtight. Next, he questioned the staff, their eyes wide with fear, their voices trembling as they recounted their version of the evening's events. The detective probed and prodded, pulling at the threads of their stories, hoping to unravel a clue, a lead, anything that might point him in the direction of the killer. But as the hours ticked by, his search yielded no results. The family's alibis were solid. The staff was just as clueless, just as horrified as he was about the night's tragic events. Despite the most rigorous tests and thorough searches, there were no fingerprints, no strands of hair, no telltale signs of DNA. Nothing. The killer had left no trace, no breadcrumbs to follow. The case seemed as cold as the lifeless body that lay in the center of the room. As the night wore on, frustration seeped into James. The family's alibis checked out, and there were no fingerprints or DNA evidence to be found. With the investigation turning cold, James decided to take a closer look at the crime scene. His eyes scanned the room meticulously as he paced back and forth. The room was eerily silent save for the distant hum of the police activity outside. His gut told him he was missing something, a vital piece of the puzzle that was eluding his grasp. As he walked around the room, his foot brushed against something under the plush rug. He pulled back the rug to reveal a small silver locket. It was partially hidden, easily overlooked amidst the chaos of the crime scene. He picked it up, the cold metal sending a chill down his spine. The locket was simple, unassuming. It seemed out of place in the grandeur of the Johnson estate. James opened the locket delicately, revealing a picture of Mrs. Johnson inside. The image was candid, a rare moment of vulnerability captured in time. Her eyes held a certain sadness, a hint of a secret concealed. The discovery of the locket led him to question Mrs. Johnson again. She was flustered, her composed demeanor faltering. It was then that she confessed to her affair with the family's butler. The plot to murder Mr. Johnson was hatched in the shadows of their illicit relationship, a desperate attempt to inherit his fortune. The revelation sent shockwaves through the estate, The staff was aghast, the family in disbelief. Mrs. Johnson and the butler were promptly arrested, their faces etched with guilt and regret. It seemed like the case was finally solved, the killer and her accomplice apprehended. But as James left the estate, a shadow of doubt lingered. The pieces fit together too perfectly. The confession too convenient. His instinct told him that there was more to this crime than met the eye. The case closed with the arrest of Mrs. Johnson and the butler, but James couldn't shake off a lingering sense of unease. It was this unease that would lead him to uncover a shocking twist in the tale. As James left the estate, he noticed a shadowy figure lurking on the edge of the property. The night was dark, the only light coming from the moon above and the distant glow of the mansion. James, driven by his detective instincts, decided to investigate. He moved silently, his footsteps muffled by the thick layer of fallen leaves. His heart pounded in his chest, a rhythm that echoed the suspense of the night. He approached the figure, his hand steady on the grip of his gun. He called out, demanding the figure to reveal itself. And then, stepping out from the shadows, was none other than Mr. Johnson himself. The man assumed dead, now standing before James, very much alive. The shock was palpable, a twist that no one could have anticipated. Mr. Johnson confessed his elaborate ruse. He had faked his own death to expose his wife's infidelity and her murderous intentions. He had been hiding, watching the events unfold, waiting for the right moment to reveal his survival. His plan, though unconventional, had worked. His wife and her lover were in police custody, their plot to inherit his fortune foiled. James was taken aback. This was not just a murder case anymore, it was a tale of betrayal, deceit, and a desperate attempt to expose the truth. As a detective, he had seen many things, but this was a first. The living victim of a supposed murder, the mastermind behind his own death investigation, but the law was clear. Mrs. Johnson and the butler would face the consequences of their actions. Mr. Johnson, on the other hand, was free, but forever scarred by the treachery of his wife. As he headed back to his car, the first rays of dawn began to break through the darkness. It had been a long night, full of unexpected twists and revelations. The Johnson estate, once a symbol of wealth and power, now stood as a testament to betrayal and deceit. A plot twisted in betrayal and deceit, the case finally came to an end with the rising dawn. Another mystery solved, another day begun, and for Detective James, another night of untangling the web of human motives awaited him. The first light of dawn seeped through the window of James's office as he returned, weary, yet satisfied. As the pale morning light washed over the room, James could not help but reflect on the night's events. A murder, a conspiracy, a shocking twist, and finally, a resolution. The strange case of the Johnson estate had been a roller coaster ride, one that had tested his mettle as a detective. He sank into his leather chair, the familiar scent of old books and stale coffee grounding him. He could still see the shock in Mrs. Johnson's eyes as her husband, thought to be dead, emerged from the shadows. The intricate web of deceit and betrayal that had been spun was a stark reminder of the human capacity for duplicity. James thought of the butler, a man who had been part of the Johnson household for years, trusted and respected, now exposed as a cold-blooded conspirator. The family's betrayal had cut deep, a reminder that trust was a fragile thing, easily shattered. The detective ran a hand through his hair, his mind churning. Each case he solved was a window into the human soul, revealing its darkest corners and deepest secrets. The Johnson case had been no different, a labyrinth of lies and deceit that had led him on a wild chase. But that was the life he had chosen, the path he had walked for so many years, the thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of solving a puzzle, the pursuit of justice. These were the things that drove him. He was Detective James, a seeker of truth in a world often shrouded in darkness. As the sun rose higher, casting long shadows across his desk, James couldn't help but smile. He had solved yet another mystery, unraveled another knot in the complex tapestry of human behavior. His gaze drifted to the clock on the wall. The hands pointed to a new day, a new beginning, and with it, the promise of another mystery waiting to be solved. Another night, another mystery solved. In the world of Detective James, the wheels of justice never stopped turning.